It was the fall of 1805, and in the quiet outskirts of Clarksburg, Virginia, now West Virginia, a man named Abel Clemens lived what seemed, to most, an ordinary life. He was 33 years old, a farmer of modest means, renting land from Colonel George Jackson, half a mile east of town. The neighbors thought him industrious, sober, even affectionate toward his wife and 8 children. But as autumn deepened, Clemens began to change. Those who knew him noticed how often he stared off, gloomy and distracted, speaking little. He worried aloud about the coming winter and about providing for his large family. His wife, Barbara Carpenter Clemens, was far along in pregnancy with their 9th child, and though they had plans to move west to Ohio by mid-November, something in Abel's demeanor suggested an invisible weight no one could name. The Clemens cabin stood near the old Jackson graveyard, not far from the road that would one day become East Pike Street. Inside, the household bustled each morning with the sounds of children. Elijah, about 11, Hester, 9, Rachel, 8, Mary, 7, Elizabeth, 5, Benjamin, 4, Parthena, 2, and the infant Anne, still in her mother's arms. They were known as a decent family, and their mother Barbara, daughter of Nicholas Carpenter, was respected among the settlers for her gentle nature. But Abel Clemens's mind had turned inward, consumed by despair. He later said that he was haunted by a terrible conviction, that his family would starve, that he could not provide, that a higher, irresistible power was commanding him to destroy what he loved most. He claimed that he was driven to the act by the fear that his children would starve, and by a voice telling him to do it. That Sunday night, November 10, 1805, was cold and still. The family had eaten supper together, unaware of the madness taking shape in Abel's mind. When all had gone to bed, Clemens took up a woodcutter's axe. One by one, he approached the sleeping forms of his wife and children. In the silence of that single-room cabin, the act unfolded with grim precision. Every blow was clean and deliberate. Each victim struck once, the attack so fast that it was said to have killed them instantly, but who really knows besides Abel and the victims? When it was over, 9 lives were gone. Barbara, pregnant with another child. Their 8 small children, the eldest no older than 12, even the infant in her arms. Abel alone remained standing in the blood-soaked room. He extinguished the fire, took what money and papers he had, and sat in the darkness until dawn. At first light on November 11, 1805, a neighbor named John Knisley arrived to settle a business matter concerning a crop. Clemens met him at the door. To Knisley's eye, the man looked pale, disheveled, and agitated. Abel told him the family was asleep and spoke with such odd distraction that Knisley thought him ill. The visitor left without suspecting the truth, unaware that behind the wall lay 9 lifeless bodies. Not long after, Clemens's brother came to the cabin to help prepare for the family's planned move to Ohio. He entered to find his brother alone. When he asked after Barbara and the children, Abel again said they were asleep, but the brother, uneasy, stepped toward the nearest bed. He pulled back the coverlet and froze. There lay one of the boys, lifeless, his skull crushed. The brother's horrified eyes moved from bed to bed, seeing at last the scope of the massacre. He turned to Abel and cried out, accusing him of the crime. Clemens said nothing. He fled the house immediately, vanishing into the woods as his brother ran to raise the alarm. When neighbors gathered and entered the home, the sight was beyond words. In one bed lay Barbara Clemens, her body still cradling her infant daughter Anne, both killed by a single blow. In another lay 4 of the little girls, Hester, Rachel, Mary, and Elizabeth. In the third bed, the 2 sons and the youngest daughter lay together, all slain in their sleep. The unborn child within Barbara made the toll 10 souls in all. Hardened frontiermen broke down at the sight. The newspapers of the day called it a scene the most shocking to relate. A manhunt swept the countryside. riders carried word along the West Fork River, and soon the entire Monongahela Valley echoed with outrage. Notices describing Clemens were printed and reprinted. 33 years old, 5 feet 7 inches high, strong built, fair complexion, light hair, has lost some of his front teeth. Rewards were offered. Yet for several days he eluded capture, hiding in the rough hills north of Clarksburg. At last, hunger and guilt drove him from hiding. Locals discovered that he had taken refuge in a cleft of rock not far from town, overlooking the river, a place that would forever after be called Clemens Rocks. There, half mad and starving, he surrendered himself to authorities. Witnesses described him as haggard, dazed, and in a state bordering on insanity. He offered no resistance. When questioned, he confessed in part to the killings and repeated the same dreadful reasoning, that a power had called to him to do it, that he feared his family would starve, and that he could not resist the voice that urged him on. Justice in those days came swiftly. Within weeks of his arrest, Clemens stood before the Harrison County Court at Clarksburg and was indicted on 9 counts of murder. On November 28, 1805, the magistrates ordered him transferred to the higher court in Morgantown for trial. There, in May 1806, he was tried before a jury. There was no question of his guilt. The evidence was overwhelming, his confession damning. Witnesses spoke of his strange behavior before the crime, his melancholy, his talk of moving west, and fears of poverty. But while modern observers might suspect Clemens was insane, that was not a valid defense at the time. The law recognized no leniency for brainstorms or madness. The jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to death. The execution took place in Morgantown on June 30th, 1806. The gallows was nothing more than a locust tree standing near the middle bridge over Decker's Creek. A crowd gathered from miles around to witness the end of the man who had destroyed his family. Clemens, pale and hollow-eyed, was said to have spoken little. He had written the final letter to his brother the night before, expressing sorrow for what he had done and resignation to his fate. At the appointed hour, the rope was placed, prayers said, and the trap dropped. Abel Clemens died quickly, meeting the justice of his time. After the hanging, Clemens' body was returned to Clarksburg. He was buried with his wife and children in the old Jackson Cemetery, near where their cabin once stood. Time has erased the exact location of their graves. Some say they lie unmarked near the edge of the burial ground, others that they rest together beneath a single mound, but all agree that they share the same soil. The crime shook the young frontier community to its core. In 1805, the town of Clarksburg was barely more than a cluster of cabins and workshops, but for months after, no other subject filled its streets. The horror inspired printed broadsides and pamphlets. The Virginia Argus ran a full report on November 30th, 1805, signed by prominent citizens, including John George Jackson, appealing to the nation for capture of the monster. The same text was reprinted as a mourning broadside by the Monongahela Gazette, framed in black and adorned with crude woodcuts of 8 coffins. In 1806, a small book appeared, Murder, Horrible Murder, containing the story of the crime, Clemens' confession, his final letter, and the judge's speech at sentencing. It sold widely, one of the earliest American true crime pamphlets. For generations, the story of Abel Clemens lingered in Harrison County. The rocky hideaway north of town retained the name Clemens Rocks, and locals whispered that strange cries sometimes echoed there at night, the voices of children, or the ghost of the man tormented by what he had done. Near the old Jackson Cemetery, where the Clemens home once stood, some said they could feel a chill pass through the air, as if the land itself remembered. Today, historians recall Clemens as one of America's earliest recorded familicidal killers, a man who annihilated his household in a fit of madness and despair. His name remains part of Clarksburg's oldest and darkest folklore, a warning, a tragedy, and a story still capable of freezing the blood more than 2 centuries later.